9:20. This week, a major change was announced to the way rape cases will be investigated. The Director of Public Prosecutions, Alison Saunders, says rape suspects will have to convince police and prosecutors that a woman consented to sex.
Consent is actually quite complex, and it's about making sure that we investigate, first of all, by asking the right questions, looking at the context, and then we have that to put before the court and before juries. And these cases are often very difficult for juries to decide on, so it's making sure that we put the strongest possible evidence there so they understand the issues around consent as well as us.
So Ms Saunders says that for too long society has blamed rape victims for confusing the issue of consent, in some cases by criticising them for drinking, for example. Now, writing in the Daily Mail, the journalist Sarah Vine has described the new guidance as laughably absurd. She says that nowadays too many women cry rape after making a drunken mistake by having, as she puts it, non-violent sexual encounters in dodgy circumstances. She claims this move is driven by a politically correct agenda to appease hardline feminists. Let's speak to Holly Combe, writes for the online feminist magazine, The F Word. Hello, Holly.
Hi, Stephen.
Good evening. And Mike Buchanan, leader of the political party Justice for Men and Boys. Hello, Mike.
Yes, hello, Stephen.
Hello there. Mike, you agree with Sarah Vine, do you?
I do. I thought it was an outstanding piece.
Tell me why.
Also, because she's pointing out that this is all about giving women ever more power over men. Now, to radical feminists such as Alison Saunders, the Director of Public Prosecutions, all sexual intercourse is rape. So we must expect that when she's appointed to a position like that, she'll do what she can to criminalise heterosexual
Well, she's
sex.
not saying all sexual intercourse is rape. It's non-consensual sexual intercourse.
That is the direction of travel. And
that's
frankly,
absurd.
I'm sorry?
That's absurd.
It's not, because at the end of the day, as Sarah Vine pointed out, how on earth do you prove consent after the event? I mean, do you have to have a signed contract? Do you have a video where a woman turns to the camera every minute and says, I'm still consenting, guys? It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
Holly?
I don't think that anyone's suggesting that there should be written contracts or anything ridiculous like that. I mean, the law actually says that consent is somebody having the full capacity and freedom to be able to consent, and there'll simply be a greater onus of responsibility for prosecutors and the police to question rape suspects, to demonstrate that the complainant had consented.
But at the end of the day, I mean, how are men to prove that, Holly? It is perverse. This is all about driving up the proportion of the number of successful rape cases. This has got nothing to do with justice.
But there's a very low prosecution rate for rape, and I mean, as it is, women don't have much of an incentive to come forward. I mean, I know a lot of women who say that if they were raped, that they wouldn't actually report because they know that they would be cast as liars. And I think that's a major problem that we have at the moment.
I'm sorry, the criminal justice system does not work like that. Women who go to the police claiming they've been raped will be taken extremely seriously, and the reason that a small proportion of claims end in a conviction is that most of these cases are a woman's word against a man's, and unless you want to move to the position that a woman is automatically deemed never to lie in such cases, which is pretty well the direction.
We don't seem to treat other crimes in the same way. I mean, when you say about, it's her word against his, I mean, there's a lot of other crimes where that will be the case, and people don't, there isn't the same level of sort of outcry and fear that the complainant's lying. And let's not forget, it's not just women who are raped, men can be raped as well, and the idea is that we all have the right to bodily autonomy, we all have the right to be able to consent, to have that respected.
Consent, Holly?
I think this will go some way towards being able to prove consent.
How do you prove consent?
By asking the right questions, in the police station, by not immediately, because it does seem to sway in the direction of assuming.
No, what I mean is, how does the person who believes they had consent and they partook in consensual sex, how do they prove it? What should they have done before sex?
I don't think that it's difficult in the situation. I mean, if you're not sure whether you have somebody's consent during sex, then you don't do it. I mean, if somebody is really drunk, if they're lying there half unconscious, I mean, surely most people, and I think most men actually, wouldn't do anything. I find it very, very strange that there is this sort of notion that, I don't know, I mean, people, it's saying all sexual intercourse is rape. I mean, I think a lot of the people where there is an outcry against this, they seem to be the ones that believe all men are rapists and can't actually tell when they've obtained consent. I mean, it's not difficult. I mean, I think most men have nothing to fear about this whatsoever.
Let me know what you think at home. 0500 909 693. Sarah Vine, in her article, Mike, says the following.
Yep.
You can blame someone else, you can make excuses, you can attempt to alleviate your own feelings of guilt and self-loathing by pinning responsibility on another. And in this day and age, that means crying rape. Is that not incredibly offensive to victims of rape?
No. Well, at the end of the day, I think that's true. I think women have been taught that they have no moral agency, they have no responsibility. So you know, when we call it the Chardonnay goggles as opposed to beer goggles. So when a woman goes has sex with Brad Pitt and wakes up finding out she's had sex with John Prescott, you know, it's of course, you know, these women are angry. You know, and so they are taught that was rape. I mean, how many of the men who tonight have sex with their wives or partners will be able to prove tomorrow that they had, full enthusiastic consent? I mean, it goes back to a practical issue. How on earth, the state has no business in the bedroom, quite frankly. It just doesn't.
So basically, it doesn't really make it. If we just say, oh well, if he didn't have consent, we can't prove that he didn't have consent, so it doesn't really matter. Like the fact that they're married or the fact that it's behind closed doors.
No, I'm just saying the bar is being set so high that to all intents and purposes, heterosexual sex is being made illegal. You know, it is just so risky. It's made so risky for men.
Holly, is lying in bed with someone naked, is that any indication of consent?
Well, it's not an indication. It's each sex act is, it exists in and of itself. So, I mean, lying there naked with somebody doesn't mean that you consent to having one sex act. It's what you say that you're going to do. It's what you say that you can do. It's what you say you want to do.
And there's two people. There's two people in one room, and obviously, Holly, not everyone makes a speech before they have sex, and not everyone asks. There is presumed consent sometimes, isn't there?
Well, I think sometimes there is, but I find it does bother me a bit, this idea of sort of that heterosexual sex will be sort of, this is putting it at risk, or that the people won't be able to have it. I mean, it's like, is heterosexual sex so reliant on, I don't know, kind of the unspoken, or that things just happen, or that it's, people can agree to the boundaries beforehand, and obviously once people have got to know each other, or if they're in everybody is different, and I think that the point is that you do have to seek consent, you do have to ask, and you don't have to have a big speech, but you can see from the way that the person's behaving.
You have to ask every time, do you?
Well, I think it is a good idea to say, "Would you like me to do this?" Like all parties. I mean, not just men, women as well.
Is that how it works? Honestly, I think often it can work like that, and I think that don't you think, Holly, on very, very many occasions, there's no discussion.
Well, I think that if somebody is just lying there and is unable to say anything, then I think they're not giving consent, whether that's because they've frozen or whether that's because they're so drunk. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that you shouldn't then have sex.
So let's, Holly, go through an obvious hypothetical situation, okay? Someone comes back to a man's house. They go into the bedroom. They take all their clothes off. They get into bed. They start kissing that man. They start rubbing up against that man. Is it fair for that man to presume that he can engage in sex, or does he need to ask? Does he need to ask out loud?
I think that I don't think it's fair for him to presume that things are going to proceed in a certain way.
But this comes down to definition, doesn't it? How does he indicate that he hasn't made the presumption? Does he have to ask out loud every time?
If you start to touch someone in a particular way and they seem to like that, then you carry on. If you do something else and then they say no, or if they pull away, or if you'll get... I mean, it isn't always spoken, but I think that the sensible thing is to actually ask.
Yeah, but surely at the point...
But if you don't, surely you can read
at the point
bodily cues.
At the point they've pulled away, Holly, then and if that's an indication that they've said no, then can that woman say that in itself was a sexual assault?
person stops when they say that they should stop, then no. But if they carry on, then yes.
Mike, it is the case that women and indeed men, because let's remember here that there are victims of sexual assault from both sexes. And what Harriet Harman, Mike, says is, we're not talking about a man making a mistake, it's about sexual assault, she says.
Yes, but again, it goes back to, I mean, you know, all these are very fine words, Stephen, but when you actually put them in the form of a scenario, as you just did, then, you know, Holly struggled to answer, because, you know, the real world...
I don't think I struggled to answer at all. I think I gave a clear answer that if that person then stops when the person says they should stop, or they pull away, or they're getting an indication that they've not got consent, whether that's verbal or not, then they should stop. And if they don't, that's a sexual assault. Yeah. If they carry on with certain acts, that's great. But if they...
Is there any chance I might have a word?
Sorry, continue.
Thank you. It's known, I mean, we have 7 pages in our election manifesto about sexual abuse committed by women, and it's known from surveys that around 25% of sexual offences against the opposite sex are committed by women. And yet, you'll never hear Alison Saunders talking about the sexual assault of men by women. And you've got to say, why is that? It's because she has no interest in it.
Well, she would deny that.
I mean, false rape allegations are very common, but it's known from a report back in 2012 by Alison Levitt, which she prepared for the CPS, that of 121 cases of suspected false rape allegations brought by the police to the CPS for charging decisions over a 16-month period, the CPS pressed charges in only 35 cases. That was 25 for perverting the court of justice, perverting the course of justice, and 10 for wasting police time. And even when women are found guilty of this, they're usually only given suspended sentences. Men's lives are ruined, and the women face no consequences.
Final word to you, Holly.
All I can say is that the amount of people I know who've been raped and didn't report it, the amount of people who... I just don't see that it's in a woman's interest in any way whatsoever. That's not to say that false allegations don't happen. Of course they do. But I think that it's not in a woman's interest to do that. If she does, then there is actually something... she's very misguided, I think, because I think everything is stacked against her. I mean, fine, you say a man's life is ruined, but I mean, look at the case with Ched Evans. I mean, that girl's life is ruined, and he was actually prosecuted. She's had to go undercover. She's had to change her name. You know, that's ruined her life, and there was actually a prosecution. You know, okay. She's being treated like she's in the wrong.
We're going to leave it there. Holly and Mike, thank you very much. You want to pick up the phone tonight? 0500 909 693.